The federal government has opened applications for a new fund worth $500 million today to help communities cope with climate change. It's meant to help municipalities become more resilient to extreme weather events like flooding and fires. Now, we often hear you talking about the urgency of the fight against climate change. Today's initiative was announced in 2022. Applications only opening up today. Obviously, it's going to take time for that money to actually get out the door and help the communities who need it. How satisfied are you with the pace you're operating at?
Well, the first thing I should say is that today's announcement of a $530 million investment with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is the first ever dedicated fund for adaptation with municipalities. Now, our government we haven't waited for this to start investing in adaptation measures. We've invested north of $6 billion already since 2017 in projects all over the country to help communities be better prepared to face the impacts of climate change. But this one is really dedicated for municipalities with the FCM, and we're very happy about this partnership. It will help support about 1,400 projects across the country, both in terms of building capacity, but also actual projects in municipalities and communities all over the country.
You talk about the billions you've invested, but an analysis by the Federation of Municipalities along with the Insurance Bureau of Canada, I know you know this number well, $5.3 billion a year to adapt to climate change. So how well are you doing meeting the need when it's a scale that large? Well,
I mean, obviously it's not all federal dollars that we're talking about here, but rightly so, we need to invest more in adaptation and being better prepared to face the impacts of climate change. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities said that they would need about $10 billion. We've already invested, with today's announcement, we're north of $7 billion, so we understand we need to do more. And I will certainly continue to advocate that we do more to support our communities, whether it's being better prepared to face the impacts of floodings, heat waves, hurricanes, and obviously forest fires, certainly something we're seeing more and more across the country.
Obviously, the discussion around the carbon tax is one of the dominant issues in your file. And last week, we had the PBO acknowledging that his office made what he called an inadvertent error in its carbon pricing reports, including the industrial price. He's saying we're not going to see new numbers for several months, but that ultimately it shouldn't alter the overall conclusions. And he is steadfast about that point. Do you accept that analysis?
I don't, Catherine. I mean, I've heard the parliamentary budget officers say often in the past that we should wait to have analysis before making conclusions. And he's doing the exact opposite of that. He's saying, well, we made a mistake in our last analysis. And I should point out that they didn't exactly come clean. Let's be honest here. They put an update on their website on April 17th. They didn't publish anything. There was no communications. We had to find it. And now he's saying, well, we made a mistake, but without having done any analysis, I'm confident that it won't change our conclusion. I mean, I think that the parliamentary budget officer is a very important institution in our parliamentary system. And as such, they should be held, as we are as politicians, to the highest standard. And I think Canadians expect that from the PBO, and I think parliamentarians expect that as well.
He's not drawing a conclusion in the sense that he's not offering up a new number, but he's saying if I look at the scale here based on the facts, industrial emissions are exempt about 80% for the big emitters. It's only the 20% of the top emissions that are subject to the carbon tax. Looking at the scale, he says it's not really going to change things. Can you point to anything to say that he's getting it wrong, Minister?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of shortcuts there, and estimation and back of the envelope. I sincerely hope that's not the parliamentary budget officer runs his office, and that the analysis that will be done.
Sounds like you're worried it is, Minister. I mean, you stop short of saying you don't have faith in him, but I haven't heard you say once that you do in the questions you were asked by reporters earlier today.
That's not. No, I haven't said that. But I think the analysis and the conclusions and the statement by the PBO should be rigorous, and they should be based on solid analysis. And right now we don't have that. Like, we don't have solid analysis. And in fact, what the PBO has said has been contradicted by a number of more than 300 economists in Canada, including one of them who won the Nobel Prize for his work on carbon pricing. It's been disputed by independent organizations outside of government. So I think if I was the parliamentary budget officer, I would be careful, I guess is what I'm saying, by jumping to conclusion. Let's look at the analysis, and my department is happy to work with him and to provide him with all the information he needs, certainly what we've been doing. And we'll continue to do that.
So, Minister, so you say be careful. You won't say you do have confidence in him. Do you think he's doing his job properly? Do you think he's done his job properly on this issue?
I think that what happened recently is below the standard that I would expect from the parliamentary budget officer, and that many Canadians and parliamentarians would expect from.
So he pointed out on this program that no one else noticed. If it was such a big mistake, he says these numbers have been publicly available. All sorts of folks have combed through them. How big a mistake can it really be if ultimately it was the PBO that first picked up on this problem?
That sounds a lot like someone who's trying to defend an error and a mistake that they've made than someone saying, here's a rigorous analysis that I'm presenting to you and that I'm standing by. That's how it appears to me.
Okay.
One thing we shouldn't lose sight of, Catherine, is that we were talking about the cost of climate change and the impacts of climate change, the first part of the interview. The parliamentary budget officer admits himself that his analysis doesn't take into account the economic impacts on Canadians of climate change, which are now, they've increased tenfold in the last decade. It was about $200 million 10 years ago. It's $2 billion now. And last year, because of the forest fire, it's going to be north of $3 billion. That's not taken into account in his analysis, and he's been very clear about that.
Minister, I think it's important then to ask you this. Do you believe that once the numbers are corrected and now that this error has been brought out into the open, is this going to change anybody's mind at the end of the day on the issue of the carbon tax?
Well, I would hope that we can have informed debate on these important things. And now that the PBO came out and said that he made a mistake, I'm hoping, I'm not holding my breath, but I'm hoping that the Conservative Party of Canada, who have been campaigning for the last year based on the erroneous findings of the parliamentary budget officer on carbon pricing, that they too will admit that they made a mistake. Well, one can always hope.
Well, I want to talk to you about the Conservatives, in fact, because you and your colleague Mark Holland, I was in question period last week when you were sort of trying to clap back against them, as the kids would say. Mark Holland was up, you were up as well, talking about, you know, math is hard, but when the Conservatives talk about this summer holiday from the carbon tax, that their numbers don't, in your words, make any sense. And Mr. Holland got up and talked about how long a person would have to be on a road trip for, stuck in the car. I'm sure you know that clip is getting a lot of pickup online. And there are voters out there who seem to think that the Liberals are taking a stand against summer road trips. What does it say about what Canadians think of your government that people might believe that you would really take a position like that?
It's another example of the Conservative Party of Canada and Pierre Poilievre doing disinformation with Canadians. I was in the House of Commons when Minister Holland spoke, and the reality is that the savings that the Conservative Party of Canada is claiming based on this tax break that would cost billions of dollars to the federal government, but we can get back to that. In order to achieve those savings, you would have to drive, and last week we were saying, based on our analysis, 37,000 kilometers. So that's like almost a round trip from the North Pole to the South Pole.
I'm asking you a more fundamental question, Minister, which is if people believe this, that you guys would come out against road trips, does that tell you you've got a problem with where Canadians think that or at least some Canadians think that your government's values are, that they think you would really take a position like that?
Unfortunately, Catherine, we live in a time now, and it's true in Canada, and it's true of many places in the world, where facts don't matter, where the truth doesn't matter, and where some politicians, and it's certainly the case with the Conservative Party of Canada, believe that they can say anything, even if it's a lie, even if it's misleading, even if it's misinformation with Canadians, and get away with it. And it's not the first time in our history we see this wave of populism, and it's not just happening here. You're seeing it south of the border, you're seeing it in Europe, you're seeing it in South America. No one is immune to that, and I think what's important is that people take the time to go beyond the bumper sticker phrase and what's being offered by the Conservative Party of Canada and look a little bit under the hood.
Okay. I get you there, under the hood, road trip. I see what you did there, Minister. We are out of time, though. Unfortunately, that'll be our last road trip pun for today, but thank you for making time.
Thank you,
Minister
Catherine.
Stephen Guilbeault.
Bye-bye.